Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us for today's webinar on addiction in families. We have Rich McDonald, our clinical director at Wasatch Crest, executive director at Wasatch Crest, to speak on this topic. And before we start, if you have any questions, you can type them into your control panel, and then we'll make sure Rich gets those answered. And then we also have a collateral packet about Wasatch Crest within that control panel, and you can download the PDF and have it to learn more about us. But I'll let Rich take it away.
Awesome. Thanks, Kayla. Thank you, everybody, for joining us this morning. This is a topic that I think is really super important for us to talk about. I think that it is something that most of us are aware is an important part of treatment and crucial for the long-term success of anybody trying to build a lasting recovery. And so I'm glad we get to talk about it a little bit today, and kind of go from there. I thought as part of the presentation too, I might touch on a little bit of my own story. I'm a person in long-term recovery, coming up on 11 years this year, a couple months from now. And when I was preparing for this and just kind of putting some thoughts together, I actually spoke to my spouse and talked to her a little bit about her experience, and I'll touch on that a little bit as well. So to get started, I think we all hear quite a bit about the genetic predisposition for addiction. It is, one of the things that is a predictor of somebody that is an addict or alcoholic. We know that there's about a 50-50 chance if a parent has the genetic predisposition for addiction, their children have about a 50-50 chance having the same genetic predisposition. One of the things that I always talk to parents and families and our clients about really is having an understanding of that, being able to speak to it with their children, and what does that mean for them and the conversations they have with their family. Somebody told me early on, and it's something that I've kind of clung to as a therapist, and working with all the clients I have over the last 8.5 years, is how do we talk to our families about addiction? And I think what I've come to believe is that it's incredibly crucial, especially for people in recovery, to discuss with their children in a candid way their experience and what their recovery looks like for them, and really helping our families understand the disease of addiction as well is super important. It's still something that surprises me from time to time when I'm working with families, is that so many people still either don't, I guess, quote unquote, buy into the disease model. I think is a direct quote I had from a family recently of addiction or alcoholism. But the evidence is pretty clear. Using functional MRIs and watching the way that the brain responds to stimuli differently in somebody that's in their active addiction than somebody who is not. I think it's pretty clear. And I feel like, if a family has their loved one at Wasatch Crest, if nothing else, if we can educate them on what that means and really the biological differences that are occurring in somebody in active addiction, the biological differences that's happening in their brain, and educate family members to help understand, I think, if nothing else, that is going to be a super important part of the family work that we do. So I mentioned talking with our kids, and my approach has always been, and this is going back to something I heard a long time ago, was how do we talk to our kids about addiction? Why is mom and dad in treatment, why are they stepping away from their families for a few months? And then hopefully when they leave treatment, they're continuing to work a program of recovery. And a lot of times that looks like 12-step meetings and being able to talk to our families about that. I was told early on when you're talking to your children about recovery, there's a difference between speaking to our loved ones and our kids about addiction and recovery when we're somebody in long-term recovery. If we're working a program and working on our recovery on a daily basis, it has to be such a huge part of our life that being candid with our kids is usually a really good idea. And the reason I say if we are, in recovery is I don't know that sharing with kids drug experimentation or, the partying you did in high school, I don't know that there's a lot of value to that. But for me, I've got 4 kids that were little when I got sober. I was going to meetings, early on almost every day. And then for years, 4 or 5 meetings a week. What am I doing every day? And how did I get here? Was it a moral failing? Just depending on the culture that you raise your children in. Unfortunately, there's still a lot of stigma around addiction. So for me, it was really important to talk to my kids about, hey, I didn't want to become an addict. This is what happened. And this is what I'm doing every day to make sure that I can be here and be the father that I want to be and be the human being that I want to be, was super important. I always tell clients to meet their kids where they're at, keep it age appropriate, kind of form questions around, what they know. So for me, I remember the conversation I had with my oldest daughter, who I think was 11, maybe 10, when I got sober, and just asking her, hey, do you know why I went to that treatment? And surprisingly, but not really surprisingly, she said, because you were taking too many pills. And it kind of floored me. Our kids know, and being direct and honest and transparent and authentic was super important for my recovery. I asked one of my other daughters, hey, when I was going to those meetings, did I explain what the 12-step meetings were? And she said no, she thought they were business meetings. So I didn't obviously do it perfectly, but they all know how important my recovery is to me now. And as they've grown up, they've seen and had the opportunity to see me pick up sobriety chips and have been a big part of that and an important part of my recovery. It's one of the things that gives me some meaning in my life, and having my family involved is super, super important. So knowing that within the genetics of my family, it's a 50-50 chance, and my approach with my kids was always to approach it with a non-judgmental approach. Look, you may be able to have one drink here and there, and it may never become a problem, but you do have a higher risk that it could turn into a problem down the road. And just really helping them be thoughtful about making those decisions, and helping them also understand that the way that I behaved in my addiction was not who I am, and it's quite honestly about the opposite of who I wanted to be and how I wanted to be. So it does, and then that's just the genetic predisposition, but we also have the piece of the way that it harms the family system. And so we know that, healthy attachment and boundaries for our children is super important for well-rounded, positive mental health in adults. And not only is there the genetic predisposition, but then the damage and the emotional distress and all of the disruption that comes with addiction also contributes to the risk of some people needing treatment as adults. So really the implications, I've kind of touched on that already. We know that because of that, it's not an excuse for somebody to, need help or be living in their active addiction, but it also helps us, but it does help us understand how we got there a lot of times. So for me, it was a relief to know that there was a biological genetic reason that I had ended up needing help. Like understanding that those behaviors and that impulse control problems and the decisions that I made when I was in my active addiction, I knew they didn't make sense. And being able to understand that medically and biologically was super helpful. And helping my family understand that. When I was preparing for a staff meeting at Wasatch Crest, and I looked at how many how many people we had helped at Wasatch Crest last year. And the number doesn't necessarily matter, but what did matter was when I looked at that number, I knew that all those individuals that we helped, I could probably, times it by at least 3 for the people, the loved ones that addiction affected. Oftentimes when I'm doing presentations out in the community where I'm not necessarily speaking directly to people that are in long-term recovery, one of the questions I like to ask is, how many of you have a family member or loved one that struggles with addiction? And not surprisingly, almost everybody in that room raises their hand. And in the current environment with the pandemic and everything else, I think it's just continued to become more and more of a problem. And helping us understand how we can support people in recovery is also super important. So mitigating the risk, really, I think education is a huge part of it. And really making sure that we have an environment or a family system that's supportive is really important. But let's be honest, the reality is not everybody has that family system. And that can be something that we have to build positive, sober support, and making sure that if we know we have a history of addiction, being able to make sure that we are putting support systems in place that will help support a healthy understanding of drugs and alcohol and that education piece, but also what to do if somebody is struggling. And I think as far as mitigating risk, our best tool is open, honest dialogue. I'm still surprised from time to time also of our fear of talking directly to families about drugs and alcohol. It's something that we still from time to time see people trying to sweep under the rug, or they don't want to talk about it. It's a point of shame. And the reality is that that open dialogue is one of the best things we can do to help mitigate risk, and making sure that people have the support they need along the way and an understanding. One of the things that I also wanted to touch on is when somebody's in treatment, they oftentimes, we're working on them and themselves, but pulling the family into the equation is huge. There's mutual aid organizations or a sober, family support outside of treatment. Al-Anon is one example. I think that if we can help families look for ways to educate themselves and find their own support system, is one of the best ways we can help somebody that's struggling with addiction. So even if somebody's not in treatment, a family member that wants to know how to be healthy and show up for their loved one that's struggling, Al-Anon's really can be a very important part of that family work. I know in my own experience, my wife was involved in Al-Anon for many years, and it was really important. It helped us. It helped her understand that she wasn't alone, and that provided support for her. But it was also an education piece. By the time I went to get help, I think the relationship between my wife and I had really reached a point that it was no longer a husband and wife. It was definitely more of a, I guess, parent role almost for my wife. It was always, making sure that I was okay. And Al-Anon helped her step back from that. They worked the 12 steps. They have their own book. They are encouraged to get sponsors, and it was super important because it changed that dynamic. And the biggest thing, I think, kind of a light bulb went on when my wife came home and told me about the 3 C's. You can't control it, you didn't cause it, and you can't cure it. And it kind of, I think we have so many times, especially with parents, we have this idea that we failed as parents because our child is needing treatment or is in their active addiction, or the reality is that with the genetic predisposition, we can be the greatest parents on earth and still find that our family members and kids need help. And so, I always encourage families to attend Al-Anon and find ways to take care of themselves first. And as cliche as the put the oxygen mask on yourself first is, the reality is that really is the best possible way to support your loved one, is make sure that you're taking care of yourself. As far as involving family in treatment, I think, as I said before, the family system becomes so distorted and broken while somebody's in active addiction. With our clients, being able to do one-on-one family therapy, meaning a spouse or parents or whoever that might be, a child, or with our clients' individual therapists, we try to get, we encourage it highly for every client, and we'll do a session every single week that they're here with us, if that's if they're willing. And we can't obviously force everybody to do that, but it's super important, and that's something that we offer. And then the other piece, again, is the Sunday family groups, where we have an opportunity to, educate family, do some process groups. It's really important, I think, to get some of the issues out on the table in the open while someone's in treatment in a safe environment where they have the resources and the support they need to work through some, really difficult stuff, right? And I've also found doing the family work helps, I guess, lessen the distraction for the individual. So many times clients come into treatment and it's really difficult to get them to focus on anything else besides maybe saving a marriage or apologizing to their kids, whatever that looks like. And if we have an opportunity to work through some of that stuff the rest of the week, they can really focus on themselves and do what they need to do to hold up their end of the process. So family work is so incredibly important. And following treatment, making sure that we've got some aftercare set up and a game plan to continue that work is really important as well. And it's one of the things that I absolutely love the most is working with clients and families. You get to see kind of the relief. Oftentimes it can also be really difficult. It doesn't always, it often does not end the way I think we would hope it would. Whether it is there's a divorce in the future or really difficult boundaries that need to be set. But the best way we can support our clients in building a long-term recovery is have those discussions up front while they're here, and really start to work through what is going on. And it also gives us an opportunity to plan for the future with additional support following treatment. And it's really important, and it's crucial for long-term success and long-term recovery. And it's a beautiful thing when you see people, both sides step up and do the work and work on themselves so that they can come back together and have a meaningful relationship in the future and start to rebuild that family system. So again, I just want to touch on, if the resources aren't available to go to treatment or to go to couples counseling or family therapy, there are organizations out there that are pretty amazing. So Al-Anon I touched on. In Utah, there's an organization called USARA, and there's a program called CRAFT, and it's I guess it's USARA, and it's free services for families. It's incredible. I've seen it work wonders, and there are places to get help and support. And I encourage everybody, if you've got a loved one that's struggling, or you're struggling yourself, and get your family involved, and seek support. You don't have to do it alone, and it's a really important of a healthy long-term recovery. So thank you everybody for joining us this morning. Do we have any questions?
Awesome. Thanks, Rich. I'm not seeing any questions, so thank you everyone for joining us today again. And then that's our admissions phone number. It's 24/7, and then our website is wasatchcresttreatment.com. Thank you guys. Thanks, Rich.
Thank you. Have a good day.